Good morning, everyone. Let me see. Hi. I hope you're having a good week. Welcome to Qualitative Wednesdays. This is one that I am talking about conducting cross-lingual qualitative research. And it's exciting because it's part of the work that I did with my PhD and something that is now also happening with my current work with QualiQ. So I see everything is working there. So the blog post yesterday talked about conducting cross-lingual qualitative research. And it's interesting because when I was doing my master's back in 2009, I took a qualitative course and I had the chance to meet many students from public health at that point, and they were doing global health studies. So it really meant that they were going to a variety of places in Asia and in Africa to conduct their capstone projects. And that really meant for many of them conducting their qualitative research in languages that they were not fluent in and kind of not knowing what to expect as they would arrive in the field. And what is interesting to me is that when that happened back in 2009, I never thought I would be in a situation where I would be conducting research in a language that I wasn't fluent in. And basically because I didn't think that I would go in a stream or global health studies. And that happened to me, but really in where I live in Edmonton, as I did and conducted the research for my PhD. And if you go and take a look at the paper that is linked to the blog post that I posted yesterday, I'll post a link as well here in our Facebook group. But if you go there, you will see that the paper is about conducting cross-lingual focus groups. And basically, we outlined the three approaches that we had. For two groups, we chose interpreter assisted, and we had an interpreter there. And we as moderators, and when I say we, for one group, it was me as a moderator. For another group, it was a colleague and a friend, Jessica, and she was a moderator for this other group. And a third group had a moderator that conducted the whole focus group in another language. We sat there and we just observed. We basically only understood a few words that were English words that women would talk and bring up in their answers, but we didn't understand anything else. We just sat there and tried to pick up on facial expressions and things that happened. And I will tell you, and if you read the paper, you will see that there was value in that. And you do pick up on things, even though you might not speak a single word or understand a single word that is being discussed or spoken by a group of people. So that was our experience. The two groups that had the interpreter were different because one of them did not allow for audio recording. So on top of being a moderator that relied on an interpreter, my colleague at that point had to take a lot of written notes. And when we debriefed, she kind of like recalled everything that she had written and everything she had heard. And sometimes she was even able to record full quotes and things that we used in our results. So it was a very, very interesting project. But the reason why it became a methods paper was truly because it was a huge, steep learning curve for everyone, but especially for me as the PhD student in that project. And at that time, I was taking a qualitative course, and I realized that what I was trying to find in the literature wasn't there yet. And there were lots of papers about language, about cross-lingual research, especially during interviews, and the meanings that are carried through language, through words, and how a moderator especially usually engages in data analysis. And think about this, and this is something that we saw in our research. When we hired a moderator and when the moderator translated the focus groups, she synthesized the data. And that's a different, that might not be your case. Like you could definitely have a moderator that conducts an interview or a focus group and transcribes and then translates word for word. But in our case, that wasn't what we agreed. We trusted the moderator as a community partner, and we gave her permission, and we agreed, we discussed it with her, that she would be synthesizing the responses and giving that to the research team in English. So by doing that, she did the initial data analysis. She made that synthesis and she decided what was important as women agreed on their answers to our focus group questions or guiding questions. So it's definitely something that has so many aspects and nuances, and I encourage you, especially if you're going to conduct cross-lingual research, to really read and try to understand what it can happen and to prepare as much as you can so that you can take steps or use strategies to be able to ensure rigorous data collection and to be comfortable with the data that you gather. I think that's one of the things that I think is the most important. Feeling that you did your best to collect the data that represents your participants well and that also is aligned with what you believe, with your paradigm, with the goals of your research questions. So it's definitely not necessarily easy. And ever since I conducted this project, it's interesting to me how whenever I go to a conference and I see that a project was conducted in another country and I can see that the person who is presenting is not like it went as an external researcher that flew in and conducted the research, my question usually goes to that process. How did you conduct your interviews or your focus groups? And people usually say, oh, we had an interpreter. And I usually ask the follow-up question, what was your relationship with the interpreter? How did you build trust with the interpreter? And how did you feel in that process of interpretation? And those are the lessons that I'm taking on to this project. If you read the blog post, I actually outlined the 3 things that are on top of mind for me as I am moving to this project, where I will be conducting a few interviews with French Canadian women. A few years ago, I would have felt comfortable carrying those interviews. I think my French was good. Back in 2012, I had a period that I actually lived abroad and I studied French for long enough to become comfortable that I think I would be able to prepare the questions and prepare follow-up questions and become really familiar with the words that I would be dealing with in these interviews. And I would probably have had no problem in going and trying to have the interviews done by myself. However, fast forward 8 years now, I would say my French is rusty. I'm not confident that I can actually carry a conversation in French. I can probably understand them quite well, but I don't think I would be able to respond in a natural way and just keep the flow of the interviews at a pace that is not awkward, especially for the participants. So I'm trying to find someone who can do that interpretation piece. In this case, it's a bit different. So why is it different? Because I can understand some French, I will probably be able to understand the answers and formulate the follow-up questions without the help of the interpreter. However, I still want to have a good relationship and build a relationship with my interpreters or whoever will be doing that job for me of interpretation before jumping on a Zoom or an online interview. Why is that? Well, even though I will probably understand some, it's not my first language, it's not my second language, and I might miss certain nuances and meanings that I don't even know exist in French, and especially Canadian French. So for that reason, it's important for me that I have interpreters who know qualitative research and who will also feel that trust and that good relationship with me. And in that, they will have the freedom to ask follow-up questions and to really take the lead if they felt that something was missing and that I didn't really follow up about a certain thing that was said by the women. So I want that trusting relationship for a few reasons. I still want to have control and to participate, but I want the person to really feel comfortable in probing and in asking questions. So that leads to the catch and release, the control piece. As I told you, when you have a moderator and that moderator conducts a whole interview or focus group in another language, and you get access to the data later already translated into English or whatever language we are talking about in your case, you let go of some of the control. If you're not probing and being able to understand what is being said during an interview or focus group, it's even more important for you to have a trusting relationship with your moderator, because they will have full control of the data that is going to be collected. And don't think that that's huge. I think you know that's huge. Don't think that that's not huge. I actually do believe that all of you know that it's huge, because it's so important, and there you have it. It's not in your hands. Besides that, there's another aspect that I want you to keep in mind, and it's probably one of the reasons why I am not going there with a moderator, and I am always cautious with a moderator that takes the recording and translates later on. It can actually pose two risks. The first one is you don't have the control over probing and asking questions. The second one is, I have said so many times that one of the most important things that I believe everyone should be doing for rigor is striving for concurrent data collection and analysis. And let me tell you, data collection and data analysis happening concurrently when you depend on someone else to translate the data can be highly complicated, because you're also on someone else's timelines and deadlines, not yours. So we have experienced that all of a sudden you have analyzed your data, you're doing so well with certain groups, or if all you're doing is analyzing data that is coming from that moderator, from a moderator, from someone who is translating, all of a sudden you find yourself with your hands tied because you didn't understand a single word during data collection. You maybe had a conversation with them on the side and you understand sort of like what happened, but you have no data to start a concurrent data analysis with your data collection. So those are the two things that I wanted to bring up. Not to say that that's the case for my current project, because that's not the process that I am initiating and striving for with the interviews that I will be conducting in French. But the last piece that I wrote in the blog post and that I think is important is the data analysis piece. No matter the approach that you take, whether you use an interpreter and you still have that role as a moderator that will be listening to the translation as it happens there and then probing and asking questions that then the translator will ask, or if you have a moderator who will be translating later on and giving you translated data, in both approaches, it's important for you to consider how will the data analysis be affected? How do you have to manage your data and your analysis considering the role and the participation of an interpreter or a translator? It's an important question because, as I already mentioned, there is that issue of not having the data right away if it's being translated. So striving for concurrent data analysis and collection might be difficult. What else can you do? One of the things that we did for our project was always have a debrief and hold a conversation with the translator after the focus groups. We also had debriefings between the research team members that were on site when focus groups were happening. And there were instances where, even though we didn't understand a single word, we noticed things happened. And if there was a participant that could speak a bit of English, we tried to engage in conversations after the focus groups and to understand what happened when someone walked away or started having a side conversation. So those opportunities exist, and that might be how you start your data analysis. So that's an idea, but it's not sufficient. When we think about the whole data analysis task of a qualitative research project that is conducted in another language, so cross-lingually, is that a word? Not sure. But in cross-lingual research, qualitative research, you need to have a well laid out plan, I think, in how you're going to analyze your data. For me, because I am a proponent and I really believe in the importance of concurrent data collection and data analysis, I would like the interpreter for this project that I will be doing to be looking at the data analysis that I will be conducting and working with me ad hoc, like looking at preliminary analysis, asking questions, challenging me, having discussions, and doing that along the process. At the end of the project as well, because I won't be going back to the participants, I would like the interpreter to also take a look at the final results and see if they believe it really not only, I wouldn't say represents, because sometimes if you think about a project, like you have many participants, it can happen that one participant wouldn't look and recognize their data or their experiences in the whole description of the final results. And perhaps it's not even appropriate if they did. But what I am wanting to hear from the interpreter is that the experiences they heard in those sets of French interviews are somehow represented or mirrored in the data that I will be writing as the final results. And also, if there are any negative cases or anything that came up in their interviews, they might ask me, where is the piece where women mentioned XYZ? So I think it will be important for me to have a trusting relationship during the interviews with the interpreters, as well as along the data analysis process. So just recapping. And I know I went back and forth, and it's partially because what I'm doing now is different from what I did and what I discussed in the paper. But the paper had a big piece on the moderator as being a translated piece of data, like translation being done after. That is not something that I am considering and won't be doing for the project that I am working on now. But I'm encouraging you to go and think of all the pieces that I mentioned and that I also discuss in the paper, if you might be in a position where that will happen in your qualitative research. So to recap, the three aspects that I am taking to this next project and keeping in mind and really close to, I would say, close to my heart and the forefront of the project are building a trusting relationship with an interpreter and striving to have an interpreter that is really comfortable with qualitative research and that aligns with that style that I have and that belief that I have, that we need to show people we care before we ask them in-depth questions about anything. I also want them to have trust in me and to feel comfortable working with me so that they can also probe and take things in directions, especially if they feel that it's important and I missed something that was in a nuanced meaning of and words that I simply won't pick up, right? The second piece is the control piece. I am trying to have some control as a moderator who will have the interpreter conducting, going back and forth between English and French. But at the same time, as I said before, I will and want to be ready to let go of that control and allow the person to take the lead and take things in a direction they will feel it's the best for the study, for the data, for the participants. And the last is I am striving to have the interpreter involved in that analysis because I believe it's important, since I will be trying to do concurrent data collection and analysis, as well as I think it's a good verification strategy to have the interpreters look at the written final results that reach thick description and to be able to challenge me, ask questions, see what they think, and whether or not they feel it represents well or maybe is not representing well the participants that they interviewed as interpreters. So those are the three things about cross-lingual qualitative research that I wanted to share with you today. I think it's an incredible, really, I am being so sincere about this. I think it's such an enriching and incredible opportunity to be able to conduct qualitative research in another language. I learned so much about language in an area that is definitely so far from my area of expertise. The words, what the meanings they carry, their role in culture and our perceptions and definitions of culture. And it was incredible. I think it is something that if I ever have the opportunity to do again, and I am having now, but I don't think it will be, I would say, such a steep learning curve as it was for my PhD study. But if I ever have the opportunity to do it again, I probably would say yes, because I learned so much more than my data. And of course, even like this methods paper was kind of like a bonus paper for my thesis, and one that I was very proud of, because having to sit down and really understand what your research process, and in that case the data collection phase, meant for the data that was collected and for the research period was huge, and not something that I think would have happened in a standard English all English qualitative research endeavor. And it's something that I definitely had a lot of fun in the end. There were some stressful moments, I'm not gonna lie. I would be lying if I said there weren't. But if you embrace and you evolve with the project, I think you will learn a lot and you'll have fun. But one last thing that I will say, and that's interesting because if you ever see how Facebook translates my Facebook lives, you will see how interesting it is. I have an accent. This is undeniable, and it will probably never leave me. I've been outside of Brazil for over a decade, and I have an accent, and that's how it is. And I'm not ashamed of it anymore. I had to do some work on that because for many years I was embarrassed about that. I will say that sometimes I play that to my advantage in a sense that it kind of levels the power differentials that exist in an interview setting. I think whenever you go as the researcher, in most cases, not in all cases, your participants feel slightly intimidated. They feel like you're looking for specific answers. And whenever I started an interview and I was transparent and I said, I have my accent. If you don't understand me, please don't hesitate to ask me to repeat questions or for me to clarify. I thought that was probably one of the strongest icebreakers I had, and I still have that. And my accent is a lot more problematic when I'm talking to someone who is not fluent in English either. So if you have two English as second language people trying to understand each other for qualitative research, that's a lot more problematic than me interviewing someone who is a native English speaker. So if that's your case as well, if I'm talking to anyone, an academic or a student who is an English speaker, is not a native English speaker, English is your second language, know that even though there might be some additional challenges in your process of being understood in the transcription phase, because a transcriptionist might not understand what you said, that has happened to me quite often, you can also see the bright side of that challenge by knowing that your transparency and you embracing the fact that yes, I have an accent and I am here trying to help you understand me and also to understand you the best way I can. That is powerful in really trying to level and more so equalize the power between the two people in an interview, or more if it's a focus group. So with all of that, today was actually a lot longer than our usual Qualitative Wednesdays, but all of that wraps up our Crosslingual Qualitative Research Qualitative Wednesday. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions, and I hope you have a good rest of your week. Talk soon, everyone. Bye bye.